Ready to dive into some seriously eerie encounters on the water. We're about to explore some first-hand accounts, and let me tell you, each one is stranger than the last. These stories are from people who, just like you, love fishing,
Hmm.
but let's just say their experiences go way beyond the usual catch and release.
It's incredible, isn't it? Even with your thing for just the facts, these stories really get under your skin. I think it's that primal fear of the unknown we all have. And when you're talking about these vast bodies of water, well, there's an inherent mystery there, something we just can't fully grasp.
It's true. I mean, think about it. We actually know more about the surface of the moon than we do about the depths of our oceans. And when you're fishing, especially in those secluded spots, you're completely surrounded by that mystery.
And that isolation, it's like a magnifier, isn't it? Suddenly, every little ripple in the water, every shadow, it all takes on this sinister quality when you're alone with your thoughts.
Okay, so let's get into our first story. This is from a listener who, like you, likes to stick to the facts. He's got this beautiful, secluded lake he frequents, somewhere in the woods of Maine. He even keeps his kayak there. But one evening, just as dusk was settling in, he sees something that just shatters the peace of the whole place.
Okay, I'm hooked. Setting the scene is so important, isn't it? To really grasp the weight of what happened.
Holy, so picture this. He's out on the lake, the last bit of light fading, and he spots a figure on the shore. This figure is dumping something from a barrel into the water. He calls out, and the figure just bolts. Our listener gets closer and gets a look at what's being dumped. A dark liquid, almost reddish.
Right off the bat, the guy's actions are suspicious, wouldn't you say? Trying to hide something like that in a secluded spot under the cover of darkness, it just raises all sorts of red flags.
And, it makes you think. We seek out those places, those secluded spots, for peace and quiet. But they also make us vulnerable. It's like we're trading safety for a bit of solitude.
Exactly. And that detail about the dark liquid, it's like a big, ominous question mark hanging over everything, isn't it? What's he trying to hide?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like he's pouring out a cooler or flat soda,
Mhm.
right? So our listener's understandably creeped out, packs up his stuff, heads home. But as he's covering his kayak, he hears this snap nearby, like someone just stepped on a twig.
Oh, I know that feeling. Classic suspense builder. In the quiet of twilight, a sound like that can really get your heart racing, especially after what he just saw.
And it gets worse. So he gets home, starts heating up some dinner, trying to shake off the whole thing, and guess who shows up at his door?
The man from the lake? Now that's bold. Downright unnerving, if you ask me. It's like he's desperate, or maybe he's just got this twisted sense of confidence.
That's what I thought. The listener, to his credit, keeps it together, tells the guy to get lost, and calls the police. But of course, that wasn't the end of it. Later that night, middle of the night, he's jolted awake by a crash. The man from the lake is breaking into his house.
Whoa, talk about an escalation. Now this is a serious threat. What was in that barrel that was worth that kind of risk?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? This time, our listener is ready, armed and ready.
Yeah.
He confronts the guy who backs off and makes a run for it. By the time the police arrive, he's gone. But here's the really unsettling part, the barrel. It was gone too.
Vanished. He was that determined to get it back, or at least make sure it was gone. It had to be something valuable, or something incriminating.
The listener never did find out what was in that barrel,
Yeah.
but he's got a chilling theory about it.
You know, that's what gets me about these stories, the ones that leave you hanging. They leave you with this unsettling feeling, like you're grappling with those unknowns right alongside the person who experienced it.
It's like that unknown becomes this character,
Yeah.
right? We're left to imagine, and the possibilities are just unsettling.
Totally. It's like our brains can't help but fill in the blanks, and we often go straight to our worst fears. But what's wild is how often reality, especially out there on the water, seems to meet those fears head on.
Man, that's a good point. Which actually is a perfect segue into our next story. It's a chilling one, a family legend passed down through generations of fishermen. This one takes us from those secluded lakes to the vastness of the open ocean. And it really highlights how even the most seasoned seafarers can run into something truly unexplained.
Yeah, there's a definite shift, isn't there? When we go from the woods and lakes, these kind of confined spaces, to the vastness of the ocean, you're exposed, surrounded by something so much bigger than yourself. Amplifies any anxiety.
Oh, for sure. It's like the ocean has this way of making you feel incredibly small. So this story, we're joining a group of friends. They're on what was supposed to be a routine fishing trip. They knew the waters like the back of their hands, knew their boat, but they couldn't have prepared for what they were about to encounter.
And that detail, the fact that they were experienced, it makes their reactions later even more intriguing. Whatever they encountered, it shook them to their core.
Oh, yeah. So they head out early, aiming for this secluded cove.
Mm.
Everything seems normal at first. They're catching fish, swapping stories, enjoying the day. Until the fog rolls in.
And this wasn't just like a light fog, right? You said it was described as unnaturally thick, almost suffocating.
Exactly. It wasn't a gradual thing either. It's like the fog just swallowed the entire boat in an instant. Like someone dropped a curtain, cutting them off from everything familiar.
You mentioned your listener was interested in the more technical side of things. And while it's definitely creepy, this kind of rapid fog formation, it can happen. It's actually pretty common in areas where cold currents meet warm air. Picture this. Coastline with frigid water welling up hits that warmer atmosphere. Boom, perfect conditions for a dense fog bank to just materialize out of thin air. Natural phenomenon, sure, but to experience it firsthand, especially with what these fishermen went through next, I can see how it'd feel otherworldly.
So we've got these experienced fishermen swallowed by this unnatural fog. And as night falls, they realize they've drifted. And not just drifted a little. They're in an area with zero cell signal. They're stranded. What would you even do in that situation? I think I'd lose it.
Oh, the tension on that boat, just picturing it. You've got the isolation, the sensory deprivation, the very real danger of being lost at sea. Perfect storm.
And then, as if things couldn't get worse, right, three of them decide, hey, let's venture into the woods on shore, see if we can get a signal. They brought flares just in case. This is where the story takes that turn into, well, the bizarre. They're walking through this dark, foggy forest when they start hearing these clicking sounds.
See, the clicking, that's what gets me. It's so out of place. Not a natural sound, not in the forest. It makes you think, something mechanical.
Right.
Or worse, something deliberate.
Right. Chills. Just thinking about it.
Okay.
So they kill their lights, plunged into absolute darkness, and then through the silence, they hear it. This blood-curdling scream.
Hold on, stop for a second. Imagine that. You're already on edge, lost in this fog, and then a scream cuts through the darkness. It's primal, that sound. Bypasses all rational thought. You're in pure fight-or-flight mode.
I can't even. So they don't even have time to react before they hear it. Rustling, heavy footsteps, something charging towards them through the trees. They run blindly through the fog, hearts pounding. One of them manages to fire off a flare. And just for a moment, the fog is illuminated, revealing a terrifying sight.
That brief illumination, it's crucial. Because it takes what was purely auditory, what they were imagining in the dark, and gives it a visual. Makes it undeniably real.
And what they saw. Enough to make anyone, even the biggest skeptic, question everything. Get this. They saw a whole pack of people, at least 15 of them, dressed in, get this, some kind of tribal gear, running towards them, illuminated by that flare. Must felt like they'd stepped into another dimension.
Talk about a fight-or-flight response. It's like a nightmare, That clash between the modern world and something primal right here in the middle of nowhere. Makes you question everything.
More kidding. They barely made it back to the boat, those figures right on their heels. Another flare, another glimpse, and then gone. Disappeared into the fog. I can't even begin to imagine what was going through their minds at that point.
Oh, the fear, the confusion, but also the sheer bewilderment of it all. Were those people even real? What did they want? It's the kind of encounter that sticks with you, makes you question your own sanity.
Absolutely. The fog lifted the next morning, and they got out of there as fast as they could. But that experience, it stayed with them. Makes you think twice about those fishing trips, even if you think you know the area like the back of your hand.
Definitely shows we've still got these pockets of mystery out there, even in this day and age. With GPS and satellite maps, we think we've got it all figured out, every corner explored, but stories like this, they suggest otherwise.
That's what I love about these deep dives.
Yeah.
They remind us that sometimes reality is a heck of a lot stranger than fiction. But sometimes those unsettling encounters, they happen in broad daylight, in places we think we know, like our own backyard. And this next story, this one really hit home for me. It's about the seasoned fisherman, a guy who loves his solitude and knows his local lakes like they're part of his family.
It's funny how familiarity can do that, isn't it? Breed a sense of, complacency, like we're less vigilant, maybe even a little blind to anything out of the ordinary.
Exactly. So this fisherman, he's got his routine, his favorite spots, not expecting any surprises. But on this particular day, as he's setting up at this quiet lake, he notices something strange across the water. 3 figures, dressed in dark clothes, wearing hoods,
The hood, see, that's a deliberate choice. They don't want to be identified. Instantly tells you something secretive is going on, potentially criminal.
Like something out of a movie,
Ooh.
right? So he watches them, they dig this hole, but instead of burying something, they start pulling things out, objects, and tossing them into the lake. He's curious, naturally, but also a little creeped out. Instead of confronting them, he waits until they're gone.
Smart move. Sometimes curiosity really can be a dangerous thing. By keeping his distance, he avoided a potentially bad situation.
So they disappear, and he goes to check out the spot. But there's nothing there. And that's when he gets this brilliant idea. This guy's a problem solver. He drives back to his car, grabs his depth checker. Honestly, I never would have thought of that.
Talk about thinking outside the box. It's amazing how a tool for one thing can become the key to unraveling something completely unexpected.
Right. So he goes back to the spot and starts probing the lake bed with the depth checker. Doesn't take long. He hits something hard, unmistakably metal. He switches out his fishing rig, puts on a heavy-duty hook, and casts his line.
Using his fishing know-how to solve a mystery.
And you know what? It works. He reels something in, a handgun. He calls the police immediately, and they bring in divers.
Yeah.
And what they find, it's like a scavenger hunt from hell. A keychain with all these different keys, old foreign coins wrapped in cloth, and the creepiest thing, a locket. It was waterlogged, but you could tell there were these faded pictures inside.
Each object, like a piece of a puzzle, makes you wonder, what's the story behind these items? Who were those figures, and why go through all that trouble to get rid of this stuff?
Right. It's like you opened a puzzle box and half the pieces are missing. And as if the discovery itself wasn't unsettling enough, a while later, our fisherman hears voices outside his house. He looks out the window, and there they are. The same figures from the lake, snooping around his property.
Oh, now that's crossing a line. It's not just a creepy coincidence anymore, it's a targeted threat.
He calls the police, obviously. But they never find whoever it was. To this day, he has no idea who they were or what they were doing, but it definitely felt like a message.
And sometimes not knowing is the worst part. That lingering sense of vulnerability, like someone's always watching.
Ugh, I know that feeling. It's like, some answers. You're better off not knowing. And speaking of answers you might not want, our final story tonight takes us back to the beach. A late-night fishing trip with a seriously unnerving twist. You know, we're hardwired to be a bit more on edge after dark, and this one, it plays right into those primal fears.
Darkness changes things, doesn't it? Makes your senses sharper. Every sound, every movement in the shadows, it's amplified.
It's like our instincts are telling us, be careful, you can't see what's out there. So, 3 friends, out for some nighttime fishing, listening to music, enjoying the quiet. Seems like the perfect escape, right? Until the stranger shows up and kind of ruins the vibe. Middle-aged guy, acting really suspicious, approaches them, gives them this once-over, and asks, "What are you boys up to?"
Sounds innocent enough, but it's all about the delivery, isn't it? The tone, the context. Suddenly it's not so innocent anymore, it's a power play.
Exactly. They try to ignore him, but the whole encounter just leaves them with this uneasy feeling. They turn off their music, keep an eye out, try to get back to their fishing, but a while later, they hear it. A car alarm in the distance, middle of the night. Their car, the only one around.
Oh man, that sinking feeling, that sound in that setting, instant panic.
They run back to the car and find every car owner's worst nightmare. Slashed tires, a smashed window, all their valuables gone. While they were distracted by that guy on the beach, someone else was cleaning them out.
Classic bait and switch. Shows how easily we can be distracted, how quickly things can go south when you let your guard down, even for a second.
And to make matters worse, the police find a large knife nearby. Definitely not your average petty theft. The police told them they were lucky to have run. Could have been much worse. This whole thing shook one of the friends up so badly that he actually gave up fishing for good.
It's crazy how a single event can have such a lasting impact. Trauma can really change your whole relationship with the things you used to enjoy, the places you used to find peace.
It really makes you think, right, about the hidden costs of seeking out solace, seeking out adventure in the outdoors. We go to these places to escape, to connect with nature, but sometimes what we find is the darker side of human nature.
That's the thread that runs through all these stories, isn't it? That tension between our desire to explore, to see what's out there, and the very real dangers that can pop up at the edge of the map, at the edge of the light, lurking just beneath the surface.
So what does that leave us, the folks who love spending time on the water? These stories, I'll be honest, they've given me a lot to think about.
I think it's a reminder, to be present, to trust our gut, and never underestimate the power of a good story. to teach us about the world, about ourselves. We might seek peace and quiet out there on the water, but we should always be ready for the unexpected.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It seems every time we dip our toes in the water, we're opening ourselves up to a whole world of mystery. And yeah, maybe a healthy dose of fear too. So next time you're out there, keep your wits about you. And remember, there's always more than meets the eye, especially when it comes to the eerie side of fishing. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious out there, but stay safe.